Hello, welcome to Read Through the Word. Today is Saturday, November 2nd, and I'm really glad that you're here with me today. We are nearing the parts of the Gospels that are leading up to the death and resurrection of Jesus. So much here that we could talk about. And I'm not sure if you're reading it the same way as me. I mean, many of you have perhaps read these accounts many, many times. And yet each time I feel like I am getting a new perspective or learning something new or thinking about something new. So let's dive in here and talk a little bit. We're going to focus on Mark. Chapter 14, verses 55 through 59, which say, "The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony about him. 'We heard him say, I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days will build another, not made by man.' Yet, even in their testimony, they did not agree." So you have probably heard information, or just in your own reading, have come across this, just sort of the corruption that was really behind the accusations against Jesus, the trial against Jesus. And I want to talk about them. I want to read to you something in my commentary. I've been using the IVP Bible Background Commentary of the New Testament by Craig S. Keener. I've really been enjoying it. And I just want to read to you this section. And it just gave me just even a deeper and a more profound perspective on really how corrupt and how devious the proceedings against Jesus really were. So, I'm on page, if you have this commentary, if you ever pick it up, I'm on page 117. And it talks about the trial. And it depicts how justice was sometimes carried out in antiquity, including by the Sanhedrin. Later tradition recounts that the full Sanhedrin normally met in their special meeting hall in the temple, the chamber of hewn stone. Written in the 1st century, Josephus suggests that they met instead very close to the temple. In this case, many members of the Sanhedrin hold a secret night meeting without advance notice in the high priest's home, though they are investigating what they claim is a capital offense. At least, according to later Pharisaic legal ideals, such a meeting was illegal on all these counts. Capital trials had to meet during the day, and only after a day had intervened might the court render a verdict. Only the worst criminals could be executed at festivals. Pharisaic rules forbade executions at feasts except for the most heinous crimes. But the priestly aristocracy would pay little attention to Pharisaic scruples, and they had to hurry before Jesus' popularity with the crowds forced his release or made him more of a hero. Given the short notice, possibly many members of the Sanhedrin not inclined to consent were not invited. Most ancient ethics prohibited such a sudden nocturnal trial, but political necessity often trumped legal ethics. And It also says that the virtuous tradition, Jewish tradition, of diligent cross-examination of witnesses brings the false testimony into question. But once these witnesses had contradicted each other, they should have been declared false, and the case against Jesus regarded as fabricated. Under Jewish and Roman law, in a capital case, false witnesses were supposed to be put to death. Even though Rome had not given the Sanhedrin jurisdiction to execute false witnesses, the Sanhedrin should have at least disciplined them. That the case continues uninterrupted demonstrates severe bias among the council members gathered there. I know that was kind of a long reading, but I really thought it was important, and it really stuck out to me. There were so many unethical and illegal aspects of this trial against Jesus. And yet they went through with it. They got away with it, so to speak. Now, we know they got away with nothing ultimately, because we know that this was part of what Jesus came to do. And we know that. But it doesn't erase the fact that the most corrupt and deceitful and wicked initiations of this trial and the execution of this trial, it doesn't change the fact that they went about this so badly. And two, one of the things that stuck out to me was that it was supposed to meet during the day. That these trials were supposed to be conducted during the day. And yes, they were rushed, but it almost feels symbolic to me. You think about the verses that talk about, light overcoming the darkness, and that sometimes people hide things in the dark because they don't want to expose them to the light. And it seems like what they were doing was not only literally in the dark of night, but spiritually in the dark of night. They did not want their corruption and their real motives to be exposed by the light. Now, they spiritually were exposed by the light, weren't they? Because Jesus, rose again from the dead, and we can see now that what they did was done in spiritual darkness. And I just think that's an interesting concept, that not only that it was illegal, but I think it was spiritual as well. They did not want their true hearts and motivations to come to the surface and be exposed by the light. Their motivations seemed to be about power and about authority. And Jesus really threatened that because he had a very different interpretation and a different way of executing or implementing authority than they did. And they did not like that. And I think one of the saddest parts to me about this story is that all of this deviousness did not come from Rome. It didn't come from some pagan group. It came from the very leaders who were supposed to be safeguarding the Jewish people, the Jewish way, safeguarding the Torah, safeguarding the temple. It came from the very leaders who should have been leading people to Jesus and not trying to kill him. And that really stuck out to me because I think today that's really an important point for us to remember today too. Our churches, our church leaders, our church ministries, all of these things, our church leadership, right, should be pointing the way to exposing the darkness in the light. They should be pointing the way to truth and to justice. And these leaders, these Jewish leaders, who very much very much turned to their own sense of power and authority and rejected the true power and authority of Jesus because it looked really different. And I think it's important for us to be able to see, what is the true power and authority of Jesus saying? What does it look like? It looks like being a servant, when James and John wanted to be at his right and left and rule with him, and Jesus is saying, be a servant of all. Jesus's way was one of humility. It was one of deep compassion. It was one of healing, of helping the poor, of uplifting those who had been really pushed to the side or forgotten. Jesus's way is the truth, right? The way and the truth and the life. He's the living water. He's the bread of life. He's the way and the truth and the life. And our churches, and especially our church leadership, should be exalting this Jesus. When a church leadership begins to exalt a Jesus that is more concerned about maintaining power and authority and keeping something in the dark that should be exposed, they are not following the way of Jesus, but following in the line of those who took his life and of those who wanted to take away his power and take away the authority that Jesus was given. And I think that that's a really good lesson for us. I think that we can be beacons of light in this way, in our churches and in the body of Christ. We can be beacons of light, making sure that we are upholding the true picture of who Jesus is. The humility and love and the kindness with which Jesus has exhibited, and in the Spirit, we exhibit that as well. We should be beacons of light in the darkness. We should be exposing anything that needs to be exposed, and we should be embracing others with love and kindness and making sure they know the true gospel. And I think that we can do that today. I wonder if there are ways that you feel like you have done that or continue to do that. I would love to hear about it in the comments. But let's make sure that we're a part of exposing the darkness and uplifting the true nature and authority and power of Jesus. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.